if you need to. And after it, Dr. Amadeo Viana from Universidad of Lleida will be asking you some questions. Afterwards, it's my turn, and then you will have time, again, about 10 minutes to give some explanations.
I am working on jokes, but I think I'm not going to tell any jokes, since maybe I chose this topic because I'm not able to tell jokes very good. So, well, children at the ages where I am studying, from 6 to 16-year-olds, are engaged in joke telling, usually at school. After age 5 or 6, they start telling jokes. They already acquired the basic structure of the sentence, and they focus on other aspects after age 5. For example, figurative uses of language, such as jokes. Jokes are figurative uses of language, since what you say in a joke is not exactly what you mean. Well, previous studies used jokes as data for comprehension and appreciation of humor. But production studies are very scarce. My studies about production of written jokes. Bardel and Barbieri, 2001, is a study that focused on production. It's the only one I could find which is similar to my study. They found a U-shaped behavior in the production of jokes, in the errors the children produced. They had Italian monolingual speakers, and they assessed oral production of jokes in contrast to my study. They don't explain their findings with cognitive theories, but I will try to apply representation or redescription model from Karmilov-Smith to the findings. I chose multilingualism because I'm interested in multilingual children. I'm interested in how they choose the language, and also for future studies, it would be interesting to have this previous one. Code switching in oral performance in the Catalan domain is very often used. It's quasi-inherent to joke telling. And humor is believed to be one of the latest aspects of linguistic acquisition. Well, I'm basing the study in the corpus ESCA, which means Catalan written at school in Catalonia. There were written jokes. The instruction given to the children was, tell a joke you like or a situation that made you laugh a lot. So they could produce different kinds of texts. I took a sample of 234 children who spoke Catalan and Spanish, but also another third language at home. They wrote one text each. I observed a U-shape in the quantity of production of jokes in a superficial observation. So because of this observation, I created 3 groups around the points of less production of jokes, which were 7-year-old, 11-year-old, and 15-year-olds. I used 12 categories to code the data. The categories emerged while looking at the data and from previous studies. Some of the categories were speech acts. I will comment only on some of them. Speech acts were the interpretation of the broad instruction that the children made as an assertive speech act or as a directive speech act. Text types were also coded, whether the texts were jokes, anecdotes, more narrative, assertive, less narrative, assertive. And I based on some studies for the criteria for distinction. Types of jokes were also coded. For structure, narrative jokes, riddles, shortest jokes, or one-liners, and expandability also. With this example of a joke, bound pages supera, there was a fish and it drowned. I could explain expandability category. If you add more details to this joke, you would destroy it. then this one is a fixed joke. Other jokes can be expanded and the humor is kept. Also, types of errors were coded. Fragmentarity, completeness, failed punchlines, and translation errors as well. The hypothesis I had is that there might be a U-shape in quantity but also in quality of production. That means more errors could be done in the same points. I based my hypothesis in Baradel and Barbieri and also in these superficial observations that I did before. My research questions would be, what is the distribution of text types across ages, and do we find any U-shape in the distribution? Second, research question number 2, which type of joke increases or decreases with age? Research question number 3, with age, do errors primarily occur? Do they coincide with production decrease? What is the distribution of language choice in the texts would be last research question. Then I looked at a comparison between humorous texts and jokes, and then also translating errors, the distribution of translating errors. Well, I will show some graphs for the results. To answer research question number 2, I looked at the distribution of text types across ages, and we see that around these circle points there are the decrease in quantity of jokes, that is the U-shape. You can see also that 54% of jokes, of texts were jokes, so this was the option more chosen by children. To answer research question number 2, sorry, I looked at the distribution of the text types across age groups. We can see that narrative jokes, riddles, and narrative jokes decrease, while riddles and shortest jokes increase. The other category, expandability, mirrors the first one. Expandable jokes decrease, while rewardable and fixed jokes increase. This means that most of narrative jokes are expandable. But when we look closer to each age, we find that the distribution is much more complicated. And we find that there are more narrative jokes than expandable jokes. It means that not all narrative jokes were expandable as would be thought. We also can observe here that the U-shape, for example, at age 11, in the first graph, is more sharp for expandability than for the structure, for the narrative jokes. This would mean that the expandability should show a U-shape more marked. I link expandability to humorous devices and humorous devices to cognitive developments. So expandability could account for humorous devices more than narrativity. In future studies, I would like to add more categories for humorous devices to look better at this point. Research question number 3 was about the distribution of errors. I saw that across age groups, we could see an overall development, an improvement. But when we look closer, here on the left we see the quantity of production in U-shape that is paralleled by another U-shape at age 7 and 11 for the index of errors I created. But for age 15 we don't observe the same, so that now we cannot link age 15 to any cognitive development. We see from different indicators that adolescents, group 3, show different behaviors. So in future studies we must assess what happens at this age. Baradel and Barbieri found other U-shapes. They found the decrease in the quality of production at age 8. They didn't look at age 11. We should look about which are the possible explanations for the differences. Maybe because their children were monolingual. Was it because they were doing oral production. Was it because maybe we had too few participants at age 6 or 7? Or because we used somehow different coding categories? We must study forward to see that. Regarding the distribution of the language choices, we can look now at the comparison between jokes and other humorous texts that children produced. We see that the Catalan was more used in other texts, while code switching was more used for jokes, and Spanish remained the same, more or less. This means that jokes favor code switching. But when we see a developmental tendency, we can observe that by groups, Catalan increases with age, Spanish remains the same, and code switching decreases. I explain these results because since we know that in oral production it is usual to code switch while telling jokes in the Catalan environment, it is different in the written mode, and I would say that the literacy and the written mode leads children to use more and more less and less code switching. Sorry, it means that the written mode would be more related to monolingualism. Some conclusions would be that some categories were tested, used, gave results, but we saw that we should add some more. For example, regarding humorous devices. These are only preliminary results. For the index of errors, if we had used other kinds of errors, other kinds of codes, maybe we could confirm the U-shape or maybe not. So we observed the U-shape as Bardell and Barbieri, but in different ages. We have to find to do the same study with more subjects and changing the aspects I pointed out.